How's it going today? So I already started taking this bike apart, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna make a little video of this. So we have, I believe it's a 2002 Vstar1100, custom and classic, are all the same motor. Couple little differences with seats and like foot pegs instead of floorboards. So I already started taking it apart. I'll show you what I took apart. First thing to come off was the seat. This one's got an aftermarket seat and an aftermarket rack with no passenger seat. So it's just the Allen head here, and the seat slides right off. After that, there are two 12mm bolts that hold on the tank here, plus some push pins on this plastic tray that holds the computer there. So after taking those two 12mm bolts out, these pins, there's a fuel line to come off, so turn the fuel petcock off, take the clamp off, remove the hose, and then the tank basically slides. Oh, and then there's the electrical plug that's right here for the the whole meter assembly that's on the fuel tank. So then the tank just slides straight back and off. Then I took off a little cover that goes here. It's a couple Allen heads. Removed that. Came to this side. Airbox was here. This intake piece goes right here, connected to the airbox plenum here. So where the air filter is, there's two 5mm Allen heads, one here and one here, and then a rubber grommet here, and a Phillips head on the intake tube. Pull that off, the air filter assembly comes off, pull out the intake tube, and that's where we're at right now. So I've already loosened this stuff up for the air plenum to come off. You got to take off this breather hose here. So I'm going to do that, and we'll start disassembling the rest of the carbs off of the bike. So now I've taken a couple of things not off completely, but you'll see there's a fuel line here. So I took the clamp off. It's right here. Pop the line off. Be careful as will be some fuel residue here. Also loosen up the intake boot clamps. We should be able to pop those off. Pop that boot off. Always inspect these for any dry cracks. This one's in very good shape. You can mix up the front and the rear. They are slightly different. So this one got a little bit of oil residue in it. I don't know how well you can see that, but that's typical and normal for these. Kind of pumps out of the crankcase breather, from the airbox, and gets in here a lot for some reason. It's usually on this carb too, the one that runs the rear cylinder. So I mean, I would just clean it up. Sometimes it's just the oil level's a little too high, and that's where it goes. So then there's another fuel line here also. Once again, I already popped it off, but it goes right here. It comes straight down. It's pretty easy, you can't really miss it. So it is kind of angled into here, and this one angles into the fuel tank petcock. So I got those off. Then we have 10mm nut in the throttle cables. I've actually gone up here to the main housing and loosened this up, took all the give it as much slack as I can to make it easier to get this stuff off. Loosen up the nuts, pull the cables off. Don't ever stress these hard, don't ever grab them with any pliers so that you don't chafe the cable. Should be able to easily do it here like I'm doing it here with just my hand. Sometimes they're a little corroded and take a bit to come off, but to come off, it's off. And then on the very top side here, there's a 8mm nut. It also has a Phillips head bolt on it. This one I could see is already kind of stripped out. I've already loosened it with an 8mm because that's a stronger point, and that bolt gets corroded sometimes too. It's very hard to get off. So using the Phillips head, I don't advise. I advise using an 8mm socket, cracking this loose. You don't have to take it off completely, and just enough to be able to pop this part of the cable out of the housing that holds it there. And pop the choke cable off, pull that out of the way. And up here, you're going to have a clamp here, which I see somebody has been in here and hasn't clamped this down properly, but this clamp, the wires are supposed to be tucked in here and pushed against here to hold those wires. So, no big deal, I'll put that back normal, but that basically goes here for the carb heater and the TPS throttle position sensor that's on the carburetor. So you have to take those two wires, two connectors, disconnect these, and then we'll loosen up the intake manifold bolts here and take the carbs off. See you in a minute. So I popped the carbs off. I just wanted to show you right here we have some dry cracking on this intake manifold boot and some on the rear here as well. It's got a pretty good crack in it. It's not all the way through yet, but that's something I always keep an eye on, because if you get an air leak in these, forget about it. You'll be fighting this thing till forever, basically. You know, thinking it's something else. So always make sure that you don't have any air leaks. Like I said, that's a pretty good dry crack inside here. However, I don't believe that it's through all the way. So you can see inside, and I'll shine a light on it later and really check. But there's it's not all the way through, but there's something that needs attention and probably should get replaced soon. Both of these intake boots. So 2002, it's an older machine now, so it's expected. Get the carbs off, and we're going to continue to take these apart by taking the float bowl screws out. And this one you'll actually have to loosen up. You don't have to remove it, but you have to loosen up this carb heater piece here. It's a 10mm nut. Just loosen that up, because there's another piece here where the ground goes to that covers over the edge of the float bowl. So also right here you see a little flathead screw in here. There's one on that carb and there's one on this side. That's your air fuel mixture screw. If no one's ever drilled those out before, there's usually a cap on these. These ones have been drilled out. People have been in here before, of course. So usually there's a little brass cap you have to drill out on these. That's part of your idle circuit, being the idle air screw. So if you have dirty carburetors and something in your idle circuit, it's necessary to take that screw out and clean through your pilot circuit or idle circuit, whatever you want to call it. Otherwise you might be spraying stuff from the inside of the carburetor right up against that screw, and you'll never get these carbs cleaned properly. So alright, we'll start taking them apart and we'll see you. I got the carbs off, I got the carb bowls off. Definitely dirty and grungy inside. This one you could see way down in here some like jellyfish looking substance. That's just all coagulated fuel thanks to ethanol. So basically to show you inside these Vstar1100 carbs. I still want to take off, but I didn't want to go too far. So they're identical on both sides, except flipped, they're reversed. For one to run the front cylinder, of course, and one to run the rear one. So because of that, there are two different size main jets. So this is your main jet right here, which is also right here on this carb. Keep an eye on your main jets, make sure they're in the right spot. This is a choke jet here, choke jet. And then down here is your pilot jet, this real small one. This is the one that typically is your issue with idle issues. You know, machine won't run without having to have the choke open. That'll be that. Your pilot circuit runs idle at 3,000 RPMs. Then switches over, you know, to your main for most of your fuel for your wider throttle valve opening. So I'm gonna take these the rest of the way apart. We have carb kits, rebuild kits, so we're going to replace the needle valves on these float assemblies, gaskets, jets, everything. Clean through all these carbs. We're going to take these air fuel mixture screws out. Be careful because there's a spring, a washer, and an O-ring in each one of those. Make sure they all come out. Make sure they all come back in, and the orientation is the screw, spring, washer, O-ring last, and it goes in. These get lightly seated when they put it back in, and then about 2.5 to 3 turns out. You know, 2.5 is kind of a good place to start, and yeah, so we're gonna get to it. So I almost have everything apart here. I just wanted to show you. So the part that has that little cover on here on the carburetor, that is the so the opposite of the air filter. So that is the left side of the bike, which is the rear cylinder. So it's a 110 main jet and a 112.5 on the front cylinder. So 110 rear, 112.5 in the front. Took most of everything apart. See the air fuel mixture screw with the O-ring, the washer and spring. So we're going to continue to take the seats out to replace those and start to clean. So I already got this side back together except for this one screw here, but just wanted to show you this where this breather hose is. It's a little longer of a screw that goes here for the float bowl, but where this bracket is and this breather hose is, this is the side. There's a motorcycle going by right now, a trike actually. This is the side that has the 112.5 main jet, and the side that has the idle knob is the 110. So got new jets in there, new needle and seats, new float bowl gasket on here. I'm about to clean this bowl up and put a new one on there. And that's it, we're going back together. Alright, so we got the whole assembly back together now. Just wanted to show you this. So your carb heater assembly, that's right here. Make sure you put that back on. It's easy, it's kind of hard to mess it up because one's got a round pin, one's a flat pin. And then bring the wires through this clamp. Just pinch off that clamp there, just to make sure that these wires can't come out of that spot. I got the air fuel mixture screws at 2.5 turns out. Lightly seat them in. Don't put them too tight so you don't peen the end over, but just lightly seat them. And 2.5 turns out in both carbs. It's always a good starting point anyhow. So now it's time to put them back on the bike. Alright, so I got the carbs popped on the bike. I always come from the left side of the bike with the carbs, put them in, and kind of start them slowly in the intake boots, and they kind of force at an angle, so it takes a little bit of pressure. But I also wanted to point out to you too that I did take these caps off, inspect the springs, inspect the diaphragms, make sure there's no tears in the diaphragm. Beware, because there's little O-rings under this cap, right here and right here. So when you put the carbs back on, this is the clamp I was telling you about. Connect the plugs, pin this clamp back over to hold these wires secured. Put on the choke cable. This little nub right here on the bracket sits right up against the end of the cable. So you always want to make sure that there's a little bit of free play as you're pulling the lever. Check it wide open, close it down. And I'm already pulling the lever, so that's all the free play. You can see that's completely bottomed out here. So always important to make sure the choke isn't stuck on at all. And I'm going to put the throttle cables on. One with the big nut goes in the front side, one with the solid nut on the cable, and the jam nut go on the back side. I'm going to pop those on, pop this fuel line here. I did replace the spark plugs, and I did replace the fuel filter, which is under here. Normally there's a little rubber grommet basically that slides over this and slides onto a couple little tangs here, but this one didn't have that, as it's been replaced at some point in the past. So I put the new one on and put it back the way it was, and yeah, I'm gonna finish putting it back together now. Alright, so I got everything tightened, carburetors are all on, fuel line's on. This is the fuel line that goes to the tank. Got the air plenum on, intake, air filter. And then I'm going to slide the tank on. The tank's going to slide right into these grommets, basically right in. Set down, be bolted down with two 12mm bolts. Fuel line on, in action. Alright, so after you slide the tank on with the two 12mm bolts, this pin these two in the back here. If you removed those, you got the connector, you got the fuel line. I didn't turn the fuel on yet, but I got the fuel line. And then I'm going to put this cover on, and that's it. As far as assembling your carburetor and going through them, we're done. I got the cover for the battery, and yeah, we'll see you at startup. Here we go, start up. Already primed the fuel pump and the choke.